I have a very peculiar engine here. Now you may say, well, David, it just looks like an engine. Well, it is an engine. It's a two-stroke engine, but I saw it on RC Groups from a member there that was really desperately trying to get rid of this thing. For some reason, this really just put a burr in his saddle. So I got it for next to nothing, basically under $20. It's an engine I've never heard of before. That's what's so peculiar about it, is it's called an XY engine. And if you look here on the side, it actually has XY on it. On the other side, it says 46. So it's an XY 46 engine. And the thing that's really peculiar about it is, where do you see the box that it came in? It came in this box. And the box simply says XY engine on it. 46A, made in China. Geesh, imagine that. Something peculiar from China. Now, the only other things that it came with was two muffler screws and no muffler. So the fellow that I bought it from was kind enough to at least include this old OS remote needle valve assembly, because I don't know if you've noticed already, this carb doesn't have a needle valve, it just has a nipple on there, so it was supposed to have had a remote needle valve. But one of the strangest things about this engine, and by the way, this isn't the first time I've looked at this engine. I actually got it yesterday and tore it down completely because I was so curious about it. I really couldn't help myself, and I didn't really feel like putting the camera on. But externally, the engine looks pretty nice. I mean, it looks about like the same casting quality as you'd see from an ASP or any other Chinese-made engine. But one of the things that's most peculiar about this engine is the carburetor. So here it has a throttle arm and the barrel rotates and all that good stuff. However, when I was looking at this, I'm like, well, where's the idle adjustment screw? So I'm like, well, the only other thing that I can take off is this big thing here that looks like it's holding the throttle stop screw on. So I proceed to unscrew this thing, and this whole nut screw thing and the throttle arm come off. So I'm like, okay, great, it came off. Now what? Well, if you look inside here, the idle adjustment screw is inside there. And I've turned it, and it is the idle adjustment screw. The thing that's so silly and strange and really utterly stupid about this engine is the attachment mechanism that they came up with to put this throttle arm on here totally obscures the idle adjustment screw, so it's impossible to adjust that while the engine's running, or even for that matter while the throttle arm is connected to the engine. So that in and of itself is really strange and idiotic, but whatever. So I've got a solution for that though too. So I thought, I can't operate this engine like that, and believe me, I do want to operate this engine, and I'll explain why in a moment. But it just so happens that if this throttle arm were actually just attached right here, there's a hole in it obviously, and then I'd still be able to get the idle adjustment screw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand this down to bare metal, get this oxide coating off, and maybe do a little sanding on this, and I'm going to use some JB Weld. And I'm just going to JB Weld these two pieces together because this whole barrel moves. That way I've got a throttle arm attached to it. I can actuate the throttle barrel as I'm supposed to, and I can still sneak a screwdriver in there and adjust the idle adjustment screw. Now you're like, well, why would you even spend that kind of effort on this? Well, it's really not much effort at all. I've got JB Weld on hand, and this will literally take me about 5 minutes to do. But the reason, and it didn't come with a muffler, I mentioned that, but I also noticed that I've got my ASP 46 two-stroke engine. The muffler will fit this engine. So my plans for this engine are such that I'm going to actually do something that I've never ever done before intentionally, which is I'm going to actually first just see if this engine will run, start, see if I can get it set, and if it runs halfway decent, then part 2 of the experiment will commence, which is destroy the thing. I'm going to find some means to just totally wring this thing out and destroy it destructively, intentionally, so that I can demonstrate what would happen. So some of the suggestions or thoughts I had for this were, I can either just put a regular 10-6 prop on it and lean it out until it just stops running, and just run it lean. Well, that's not quite as exciting as I would like it to be. So I try to think of another thing that somebody might inadvertently do to an engine, which is maybe just put too small of a prop on this thing and over rev it until it just explodes, or whatever happens to an engine when you over rev it completely. I'm not entirely sure what would happen. I have never done it before, but it's an option. So these are the things that I'm going to do with this $15 engine. Basically, it's going to be a sacrifice just for video making and entertainment purposes. But like I said, the first thing is I actually have to get the thing running. Now, I did take it apart, and there are some things that are kind of silly or strange or whatever about it. Is that these head screws, the engagement portion is really shallow. And it's so shallow it doesn't even hold the hex key in there. And it's just really kind of irritating to even try to remove these things. I want to just take the head off real quick and show you that it does look like a real engine. I took this completely apart last night. Crankshaft, bearings, I took everything out. So the front bearing was a metal double shielded bearing. I removed one of those shields, the rearward facing one, reinstalled that, and the rear bearing was actually a double shielded bearing also, and I removed that as well. These screws have already been replaced because the ones that were in it were so stripped, and if you see here, this boss is completely threaded through. So the screws were stripped and these top two wouldn't even tighten. It was the screws, and it wasn't the casing itself. So I found some other screws from an old RC car set of screws, and I put them in here. These are stainless steel. They threaded in, they'll hold that back plate on nice, and they didn't seem to strip the casing out at all. So the other screws are gone, tossed, thrown away. The thing that I think is kind of curious about this is that it actually has a rubber seal. Rubber seal here is the gasket, which I think is pretty interesting. So I didn't take any pictures of this engine when I disassembled it last night, so that's kind of why I figured maybe I'll just pull it apart here again real quick, so I can document the internal condition of it before it gets destroyed, so that I can have before and after. Now, mind you, I'm not even sure if this thing will even run. I mean, it has compression. There's really no reason why it shouldn't run. So, oh, I gotta pull the sleeve out first. Pull that sleeve out. So there's that. So it's an ABC type engine. There's no ring on here. The piston looks weird. I don't know, maybe I've got the light too bright in here or something, but the outside of the piston actually looks like it's a polished finish, and it's got some weird kind of wear rings here. I don't really understand what that's all about, but I mean, it's just weird. I've never seen a piston that had like a mirror type finish before, so I'm not quite sure I understand that exactly, but it does have a pinch at the top, so it's an ABC construction engine. That's as far as I'm going to take it down. Crankshaft didn't have any issues at all. There was light rust on there, and I just kind of threw some oil in here, lubed those bearings up, and they're pretty smooth. So for my purposes, they're going to do what they need to do. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to document the internal condition of this engine, because the next time I take it apart, I may have a broken crankshaft or a broken connecting rod, or a completely seized up engine. Who knows what's going to happen to it, really. But anyway, it should be interesting to see what happens with this awesome XY engine. stay tuned to see what it looks like when it comes apart next time.